Hello everyone, and good morning on my behalf as well. So I'm the Chief Data Officer for OP Group. We are the largest financial institution in Finland with like 40% market share in banking and insurance businesses. And I will now talk about the value of data in the new banking order, sort of looking at it from the industry point of view, but also from the company point of view. So I'll first talk about a few sort of high-level topics, but then I will also talk about sort of how OP has derived value out of data, and then I will end sort of on a new concept that we have been refining, at least in Finland, called the data balance sheet, and I want to sort of elaborate how we think of data balance sheet and the value of data within that kind of description. So first of all, I mean, data is nowadays the biggest asset for most of the companies. I mean, if we look at the top 5 companies in the world, most of them are very, very data intensive. I mean, it has happened pretty much in 9 or 10 years that the biggest companies of the world are not anymore having the tangible assets in their balance sheets, not that much at least. They are more and less focusing on the data and how well they actually can utilize the data to enhance their businesses. I mean, looking at the situation right now, I mean, obviously these companies that we all know, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, so on, they are the biggest companies and they are very data intensive. But at the same time, when we look at the old companies that were sort of worth more, they are now worth less. Like Exxon is more like 200 billion nowadays. Shell is like 100 billion. And PetroChina, for example, 100 billion. So when we look at some of the companies that were the top dogs, top players 2011, they are not there anymore. Not only that they are not in top 5, but they are actually valued less. So the companies pretty much who are now in top 20, this is only top 5, they are all data intensive. So knowing that the data is a huge asset for companies nowadays, I mean, anything that has value has a risk attached as well. I mean, there could be a data breach, there could be sort of an issue with privacy, but there could be also sort of sustainability angle, the ethics of using data. I mean, especially in the banking area, the trust is everything, and we cannot sort of give a customer sort of a feeling that we are doing just like this speaker is doing or stalker is doing in this cartoon. I mean, the thing is that in the digital world we all have copies of ourselves, and maybe at the current moment we are not so sort of protective for the digital copy, but I think that the new generation is, and sort of the awareness of data privacy and how careful you should be sharing your data is going up. And basically, we simply cannot afford the customer's view on the ethics of bank, or for example, OP Bank, to degrade. I mean, we simply can't. The trust is everything, and getting this kind of feeling that we are stalking over the customer is not acceptable. We cannot afford that. Nowadays, bad news, they travel fast, even faster than a lightning, and basically we might lose huge amount of customers in a heartbeat. So like I said, I will continue on the trust path. So access to data is not something you should take for granted. Nowadays, customers, they do demand actually value if they share their data. I mean, 2019 Accenture Global Financial Services study actually showed that 75% of the banking customers are nowadays quite careful in sharing their personal data. But the interesting thing is that 60% is actually okay for sharing personal data like location, like lifestyle, and kind of description of their personal life if they see clear benefits. Only if they see clear benefits. And that's the interesting thing, that we shouldn't take data for granted. I mean, it's their choice if the customer wants to share it, and it should be sort of made sure that they have the trust. They can be sure that it is safe, but also they can be sure that they get something out of it. So clear monetary benefits like discounts in OP, we are a co-op, so we give bonuses out, actually pretty big bonuses out, and then obviously we protect the customer, not only sort of that the data is safe, but we use the data to identify anti-fraud or fraud cases and do anti-fraud, and we identify financial issues for companies, for example, before they've happened. So being sort of reactive is not enough. We have to be proactive and use the data for the benefit of the customer so that they can feel it and they can see it. Obviously, it is also important for customers to manage their data. I mean, we are one of the last industries in banking where we have thousands of people in different branch offices and call centers who are keying in the customer data. I mean, Microsoft wouldn't do that. Amazon wouldn't do that. They have externalized sort of the management of the data for the customers. And also, I believe that in banking, we have to more and more do that and make the customer actually maintain and make sure that the data is in good quality. Then talking about some of the big things changing the industry, like open banking and PSD2, I mean, it is interesting to see the value in those value chains. I mean, we have now moved to post-PSD2 era, and the data is many times actually the big currency. We also in OP have partnered with many fintechs. We have partnerships with old players as well, and in many of those partnerships, we don't actually share the revenue as such. We actually share the data, and the data is the currency. Another interesting thing sort of on this is, again, on the trust. I mean, we as OP, we have 40% market share in Finland, and we are a sort of a strong brand. It seems that in this PSD2 era, when we have maybe 5, maybe 3, maybe 7, maybe 10 people, different companies working in a value chain to provide the best customer experience. I mean, but as we are so strong as a brand, it seems that we are actually responsible for the whole value chain, no matter how small or big part we will play in that partnership. And that is a new thing that we have to sort of learn to play with, because we didn't have experience on that kind of things maybe in the past when we didn't have this kind of services. Then there is another interesting thing about sort of the data and how you look at the data, that some players seem to have different rules. I mean, in bank, we have to be quite conservative in how we use data, but Google, Amazon, Facebook, and likes, I mean, they basically have different rules. I mean, they look at sort of the situation from the point of view that even if they have data breach or something that they use, like Google sold some of their data to MasterCard and so on, or actually vice versa and so on. So they are not punished the same way as a bank would be. So being sort of cool new kid on the block actually gives quite some benefits. Then I will share a few thoughts about the actual benefits we have derived from data. So talking about 2 million euros from chatbots, actually that's per year. That's not so much yet. But after this year, we will see probably 4 to 5 million per year benefits. And obviously, we have used data significantly for many AI use cases. We have I would say more than 50. Depends how you define really what is AI and what is not. But we have 50 use cases. We have used AI for a significant gain. And when we look at the total sort of benefits all together, adding robotics there, we are looking at almost 100 million euros of cumulative benefits in the couple 2 or 3 years journey, when we have utilized the data more heavily and AI, when we have really invested into it. I mean, looking at, for example, some of the areas like AML, we have really got big benefits on taking out the false positives, and also something that is not visible here, and we have been able to do very good things in anti-fraud area, where we can have proactive models to prevent financial fraud. Customers are especially happy if we can do that early on, before it has even not happened yet. Obviously, customer understanding and using data and AI for getting a better grip of what the customer will do next, not only what the customer is doing now, is important, and it helps the sales. I mean, what I'm really proud of is one of the biggest campaigns that we have in insurance sales. We had 11% hit rate for cold calls, and anyone who has been running a call center or working in that kind of area knows that when you have cold calls for customers, 11% rate is very good when we talk about the insurance business. Then I told you that I will talk about this data balance sheet concept a bit. I mean, the data balance sheet is something that we have maybe not invented as such, but we have created one version of it ourselves. I mean, looking at the data balance sheet, the idea is that it would be a bit similar or very similar analogies to financial balance sheet and financial statements. I mean, we want it to look the same because we actually believe that in the future, this is one of the statements that everyone will be looking at when they actually value a company, when they look at how they are dealing with their most important assets. I mean, in Finland, when talking about OP, we have the 40% market share in both banking and insurance, and it means that we actually have the biggest data capital or information capital in Finland right after the government. Obviously, government maybe doesn't think of the data asset the same way, but I would argue that some of the banks, we do have so huge data asset and it's so underused that we should be punished in the markets by the stock analysts if we don't actually use it more. Talking about using it more, obviously we have GDPR and we have some of the other regulations to comply with, and of course the minds of the customer. So it doesn't go for without saying that even if the regulation allows it, we have to think if the customer wants to allow it, and that's as important as the regulation. So talking about the data balance sheet, we have on the other side the data assets, and then we have on the other side we have the data equity and liability. So very similar to the data to the balance sheet, financial balance sheet. And the idea is that when we have the assets and when we have the liabilities, on the liability side we have the raw data. And when we think about the raw data, it's like a pile of rocks. I mean, it's worth nothing if you actually don't harvest any benefits out of it. Pile of rocks is valuable when you know that lithium is there. And lithium is valuable if you know that you can make batteries out of it. And obviously batteries are valuable if you know that they will be needed in many portable devices and cars and so on. So you have to understand sort of the chain of refinement on the data to be able to understand that how do you make assets out of basically the liabilities. I mean, raw data is a liability if you don't use it. I mean, if you don't use it, if it's not connected to any business process, it's basically worth nothing and it's only a risk. The data doesn't have an intrinsic value, and that's why we think it is so important to understand the chain of refinement from the raw data being the liability pretty much, how we can then transform it to an asset that the customer actually holds value for, and how we can see maybe also internal efficiency gains in the company. So on a very, very high level, I mean, this is how the data balance sheet looks like in our company. I mean, obviously, you can actually look for OP and data balance sheet. You can see the English version or Finnish version if you know the exotic language of Finnish. And we are making the concept more tangible every year. So the first year was very high level. The second year we have more data in it, and we have more sort of a description of the value in it. And next year we still have a very, very much higher ambition. Every year we want to sort of put more actual data monetization kind of angle into it. And this is sort of the very, very high level description of it. What I think is why we do this is sort of about leading the data or leading with information and leading the information. So we want to sort of have the both angles here. So we want to lead with the data, and we are leading with the data so that we get the data to the right place, right time when it's needed. Like I said earlier, I mean, if you don't actually have the data where the customer is, where the transaction and interaction is happening, it has no value really. So we have to understand how we refine it. We have to understand how we deliver it and make it available for the right place. And this is one of the tools. This is not the only tool, but one of the tools how we lead this area. I do think that when we look at the actual future, when it comes to data balance sheet, that this will, in one form or another, be one of the most important statements for any stock analyst investor when they value a company. I do think that there should be a return on investment requirement for the data assets that the companies have. And I do think that if the company is not actually utilizing the data in a good way, the company should be pretty much punished. Not in a way that the regulation says that it should be punished, but we as an investors and shareholders, we should tell them, and we should actually demand more out of the data, more value to the customer, more value to the company, to the business, and in that way make sure that the business is developing and preparing for the future. Because like I started the presentation, I mean, the companies that are already right now the most valuable, they are the companies who can and will and are willing to utilize the data. If we are not one of those companies, are we gonna be in the top in our industry or in top of any industry? Are you looking at data as an asset? I think that is a question that we all have to ask from ourselves. And when we are looking at it as an asset, how do we derive the value? What kind of services, digital mortgage services, what kind of investment assistance can we create? What kind of value can we bring to the company, and what kind of value can we bring to the customers? So that was my presentation on how we look at the data from the perspective of OP Financial Group in Finland.
Sameli, thank you very much indeed. That was really fascinating, and our questions from the audience do reflect that. Really interesting. I thought those last slides were quite enlightening, and if other companies, other banks aren't doing that, I mean that's my first question, although I won't ask it straight away, is should everybody be doing this? You know, and I think you've already answered that at the end. You know, everyone should be having their own data balance sheet. But let's just mention to you at home, if you're having any technical issues today, just wanted to mention that you can hopefully get rid of them pretty quickly. If you're losing any access to your sessions, just try refreshing the browser initially. If you haven't tried to already, that might well clear the problem. I think the hub has heard a few points from you on that one. So do try refreshing your browser straight away. That'll be really useful. Now, actually, we have, I think we have our pundit. Let me just check. Kevin is ready to ask you a question. We have questions here. Questions from Kevin. Let's go to a live question from Kevin Mountford, our pundit. Just tell us, first of all, who you are, where you are, and then ask your question, Kevin.
Hi, guys. Sameli, great start to the day. So, yeah, Kevin Mountford from Raisin UK, from a somewhat cloudy Chester. We started yesterday to talk about the importance of data, and I guess concluded there's not many organisations that don't see data as being fundamental. And then you reiterated that in terms of the asset value. The kind of names that you called out at the start, so the Google, Amazon, Facebook, they're the obvious ones. But the banking sector holds a lot of data. But generally speaking, do you still think it needs to, I guess, improve the way it not only captures the data, but puts it to good use to ensure that it has got the value you've described?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, there are huge benefits to be harvested. And I think that it's not only sort of that it's not also, if we don't actually understand that we should hold data as an asset and as a huge value, there is also the regulator who is telling with different regulations that we need to manage it. We need to know how the data flows are going. We have to understand how we do information management in a good way. But I would say that there is so much potential, for example, in the efficiency gains. I mean, how can we do credit decisions in a more better way, in automated way? For example, what we've done one of the biggest AI implementations where we do on the spot, on mobile, a housing loan decision. And that was not an easy thing, but we got it done. And now 15%, 20% of the housing loans are done in an automated fashion on the spot right now. And why that is important, it is better service for the customer, because customer can actually commit to a transaction right away. But at the same time, it is efficiency, because we have 13,000 people working for us, and out of those, 60% are working in credit decisions. So if we can automate 15% and go from there 20%, 25%, 30%, maybe 50%. I mean, those are huge efficiency gains, and that's just in sort of the core business. But looking at AML and anti-fraud, for example, and looking at the situation where we have right now real-time payments coming in, we have value chains of open banking, 3 or 4 counterparties. I mean, if you want to be there and if you want to protect the customer, you have to be proactive. You have to have, for example, machine learning models that sees a fraud before it has happened. And these are the things that we have to go for the customer. And that's the next level of customer experience, that be proactive, not only reactive.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin, for that question. We'll see you later on. That was really good. And it does go to that whole point about understanding the value of data. Question here, which is sort of what I would have gone through as well, actually, Sameli, is from Luke Eggington Groves. Thank you, Luke. What tips do you have on getting buy-in from the organization on the value of your data and data quality? For example, how do you link and measure data to business benefit? Now, that last slide there was really indicative of how you can do that. That was a top level slide, but it showed you, it categorized all that data, and then you look back at those benefits. You obviously went through the process yourself. How do you start to advise others to do that?
I think, like I said, data doesn't have an intrinsic value. I mean, it has only value if you can link it to a business process and sort of customer interaction and so on. So what you need to do is to sort of understand, first of all, what kind of data sets do you have, like market data, like household data, like risk management data, and so on. And when you understand what kind of data set are you looking at, if you look at the sort of the core customer data, what are you looking at, then you should be able to sort of get a grip of the potential it has.
Yeah.
I mean, what is wrong with the business? If there is nothing wrong, where could you do even better? I mean, most of the time we are stagnant in a way that we think we are doing okay. We are not doing bad, and we are not looking at the potential that some of our assets have. And when we talk about the tangible world, it is so easy to sort of picture what could you do next. But when it comes to the data, where you really need to challenge yourself and challenge the status quo on how you are currently using data and how could you be using the data. Yeah. Especially it helps when you think about the reactive versus proactive. I mean, mostly we in the banking sector, we are reactive. We wait for the customer to contact us and then we start a process. I mean, understanding the customer's needs before they have not even happened. I mean, the lifestyle, for example, looking at the location of the customer, that kind of things. That by the way, the customer has to have a consent given. So when you have the consent, you can do a lot, and you can actually start looking at what can you do for the customer and to make his tomorrow better, not only today better.